Hello there, Sye here today, and today I'm going to reveal a recent study that has got a lot of anti-vegetarian, anti-vegan people jumping up and down, cheering about how the vegetarian diet is bad for you and it causes inflammation. Now, I'm going to go ahead and clear some things up. But the name of the study is Positive, or at least the title, Positive Selection on a Regulatory Insertion Deletion Polymorphism in FADS2 Influences Apparent Endogenous Synthesis of Arachidonic Acid. Okay, so arachidonic acid is an omega-6 fatty acid. Actually is good for you, and it's very good for your brain. You need to have it. Too much of it is associated with inflammation, but it's also associated with anti-inflammation. So the positive selection on a regulatory insertion deletion polymorphism. So basically, they're saying that there is an adaptive quality on the genes for the fatty acid desaturase that is basically influenced by vegetarian vegan diets, and also people who are not vegetarian vegan in an opposite sort of way. And they're saying that people who are vegetarian for generations, like the Indian population, from India, they have developed an ability to convert non-DHA EPA omega-3 fatty acids into DHA and EPA more efficiently than people who do not. But along with that, more arachidonic acid is created, which leads to inflammation. And they're saying that this can cause all kinds of problems for a person who is vegetarian, supposedly, based upon the fact that arachidonic acid or omega-6s in general can cause increased inflammation. So let's go back a little bit here. And in Inuit tribes, it's been seen that there is an opposite sort of adaptation where they're not able to convert as much omega-3 fatty acids from plant sources into DHA and EPA, which are essential, and you can find them in things like fish and certain animal products. And there is some EPA, I think, in like at least one green plant, purslane, I believe. And there's some EPA, for example, in some algae. But long story short, DHA and EPA are converted by the body from shorter chain omega-3 fatty acids in a vegetarian or vegan diet, whereas people who eat fish and some other animal products get them directly, and they're good for your brain and also good for anti-inflammation. Now, it's already been discovered pretty much that the ratio of omega-3 fatty acids to omega-6 fatty acids matter more than if you get enough omega-3 when it comes to inflammation. So you want to have a relatively low omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, and I think ideal is something like 1 to 1, but up to 4 to 1 omega-6 to omega-3 is still pretty healthful and can be achieved pretty easily, as I'm going to demonstrate, but with a vegan diet now, or a vegetarian diet. Now, going a little bit further into this, when our bodies convert, there's traditionally a relatively low conversion rate. And so a lot of people who are not vegan or vegetarian have said that vegans or vegetarians should not be vegan or vegetarian because they are not able to get enough EPA or DHA. Now, I have looked into this in detail, and there are different studies that show different amounts, but the normal rate of conversion is something like 5 to 20% of omega-3 fatty acids, which are not DHA or EPA, are converted by the body into DHA and EPA. Now, up to 25% in some studies. And I'm assuming, based upon what I know now about the Indian population, that they are able to convert maybe even higher than that. This also could mean something else. And so just for a minute, I'd like you to think about it, that different populations in the world coming from different places may have certain adaptations just based upon the fact that that's where they've been for generations and generations and generations. And it might not really be related exactly to whether they are vegetarian or not. Another thing, the study and what was looked at were genes from people from Kansas and people from India. And it was generally stated that 35% of the Indian population that they looked at the genes of were vegetarian. So they're not even fully vegetarian population. But that's aside from the point. There are other populations in the world that seem to show that there's an adaptation towards this fatty acid conversion in certain places in the world, and there's an adaptation that's opposite of this in other places in the world where maybe people might tend to eat more fish and things like that. Now, that being said, there were a lot of controls taken into consideration, but the hypothesis was that there would be a higher conversion for certain people who were more vegetarian in the beginning. And a lot of times when people are looking for something specifically, then they find that specific thing that they're looking for. And not to say that it doesn't matter, but it was a relatively small number of people, talking about 200 and something Indians and 100 and something Kansas genes, and I believe not even people from that are living right now necessarily, but from extracted DNA from people from those populations from another time. Now, that being said, what we're really talking about is inflammation is related to a lot of diseases, and that is what people who are reading this study and interpreting it in that way are saying, that if you have a vegetarian or vegan diet, that you're more likely to have inflammation. But it's also been shown that if you eat red meat, you're more likely to have inflammation. Also, vegan vegetarian diets have been shown to be more preventative of disease in general than associated with disease. And in a general sort of way, there's a lot of people that are very healthy on vegetarian vegan diets. Now, that being said too, vegetarian versus vegan brings up a whole other subject. The main thing that we're looking at here is how can you be vegetarian and not worry about inflammation? And I'm going to state here again, arachidonic acid is the main culprit in this particular study because more arachidonic acid is produced when people are converting at a higher rate. But that doesn't even account for the fact that most people don't have this adaptive quality anyway. And so you would actually be converting less if you were not from India or some of these other places where people convert higher, which has its good and bad in this particular scenario. Good being that you're not going to create as much arachidonic acid. Bad being that if you're a vegan or a vegetarian, that you won't create as much DHA or EPA as easily either. So there's the up and the down side there. Now, just to give you an example of the biases of the people who are looking at this study, one person said that you should eat more omega-3 rich foods as opposed to omega-6, which is true. But then they said that you should consume things like olive oil. Now, olive oil is one of the very worst omega-6 to omega-3 ratios. It's something like 12 to 1 ratio. Corn oil, as far as my particular knowledge up to this point shows, is the very worst at something like a 40 to 1 ratio. And this is where, if you're looking at the modern diet and vegetable oil is one of the biggest dangers for people if you're really looking at imbalanced omega-6 to omega-3 ratios. So how can you fix this? You can fix this, first of all, by almost completely eliminating all sources of vegetable oils from your diet. And when I say vegetable oils, I'm talking about overt oils or concentrated straight oils, not the actual foods themselves. And if you do that, then you're going to automatically increase your health for multiple reasons, but you're also going to make it a lot more difficult to be in a really bad ratio of omega-6 to omega-3, because the main source of omega-6 oils comes from vegetable oils. And you know now that corn oil and olive oil are both really bad ones. Now let's turn it around here. Hemp oil and flaxseed oil are very good ones. In fact, there's much less omega-6 fatty acid than there are omega-3s in flax oil. So one thing you could do is consume omega-3 oils through flax oil, which is basically going to offset that ratio. And you wouldn't have to consume too much to do that. But if you have a little bit of oil every day, it's not going to hurt you. But a tablespoon of flax oil is going to at least give you some more omega-3s, and it's going to give you a very small amount of omega-6s, which in the ratio of something like 0.28 to 1. So omega-6, 0.28, omega-3, or 1. I'm sorry, not 0.1, but so 0.28 to 1. And very good ratio to help offset the balance of not getting enough. Now, greens in general are higher in omega-3s than omega-6s, or at least have a very good ratio. And many fruits, including bananas, also have a good ratio of omega-6s to omega-3s. In fact, I think omega-6, omega-3 in bananas is something like 2 to 1. So that's very good. And almost all foods have omega-6s and omega-3s. So you are going to get omega-3s, which will be converted by your body into DHA and EPA if you're not getting them from some outside source. And what is good and positive is that when the amount of omega-6s were reduced in the diets of these people who were already converting at a high level, then there was a significant increase in the creation of DHA. Now, this is one of the most important ones, and one of the most important things to remember. I think it's an 8% increase was associated with decreasing the amount of omega-6s. So if you decrease the ratio significantly, you're going to theoretically increase DHA conversion, which is what you want. And of course, some people are going to say that you should just not be a vegan and not be a vegetarian. You should take fish oil. But I want to be clear that, first of all, fish oil can be very bad, especially there's a lot of rancid fish oil, and there's a lot of rancid oils in general, including some oils that are like flax oil that are not refrigerated or kept properly refrigerated, or that get a lot of light because they oxidize, and that makes them not good for you anymore. So that's one thing to be concerned about with fish oil or flax oil, which obviously fish oil being not vegan, flax oil being vegan. But the other side of this is that fish oil, you can get too much and it can have negative effects on you and actually hurt you health-wise. So you want to be really careful that you don't overdo that if you weren't a vegetarian or vegan, for example. So whole foods are usually the answer, and in a lot of diets, specifically Doug Graham, McDougall, I forget what the other person's name is, but he, I forget, I don't want to say what the name of it is, but basically it's a person who recommends no vegetable oil. That's one of his big deals. He's a vegetarian, vegan proponent who says don't eat any vegetable oils. So if you don't eat any vegetable oils, you're going to be in good shape for the most part. But coconut oil has basically little to no omega-6s or omega-3s, so it's not going to put you in a bad place if you have a little bit of coconut oil. And there are some benefits to having coconut oil, including the fact that some of the fat from coconut oil digests more like carbohydrates. So coconut oil does have some benefits. Flax oil obviously has some benefits. Chia seeds are very high in omega-3s. In fact, I believe higher than flax oil. So there's a lot of omega-3s in chia seeds, for example. But just a little bit of knowledge about where to get more omega-3s from if you want to really try and balance things out. And if you want to consume a little oil, you're not going to hurt yourself by consuming flax oil and coconut oil. Now, and there are some other oils. Even canola oil has a low ratio of omega-6 to omega-3, but it might not be really an ideal oil for you to consume anyway. But now you have some basic knowledge. You have a better understanding of this debate. And in general, we already know, and I mean, I could go and read off of some other studies about vegan, vegetarian-based diets, or vegan diets specifically, that show a multitude of benefits that you get from going in this direction. And there are mostly benefits to doing this. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of what you might need to do if you're a vegan in this to really make sure your bases are all covered, because that would be for another video. But I did want to cover this, and when you start hearing about this new study based upon the Kansas people and the Indian people from India, and they're telling you in a negative sort of way that this means something bad for vegetarians or vegans, you can actually look at them and say, maybe it means something bad for some vegans and vegetarians, or people who just generally consume a lot of omega-6 oils, which is probably most of the population who eats lots of vegetable oil, even if they eat meat. So hope this helps. Hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.